Welcome, everybody, to another Art Clinic Online interview series. We welcome today two wonderful people, a friend of our ACO, Adah Rose Bitterbaum, who has a gallery in Kensington and has a wealth of contacts among the artist community. So she is the gift that keeps on giving for us. So that's wonderful.
My
And
pleasure.
today she has Susan Stacks, who she'll tell you more about it. So I'll leave it for her. I just wanted to welcome everybody and also tell you we now have a new Art Clinic Online website, courtesy of Jordan, who typed it into WordPress. Thank you so much, and got some help in designing it. And what he's doing is slowly migrating all the talks and all the announcements for coming up artists and the previous artists, so you can see it in the Art Clinic Online. We're going to send you the link, but it's probably already on his website. But we were using his website in a dual fashion, and now we'll have a separate entries, although still connected. And still we will have our YouTube page will continue to be populated. So either way, you can follow the artists and review the archive presentations. Our next, we're going to take a little break. Our next ACO meeting will be May 9th. And then, so welcome I hope you plan to join us for that, but we will have about 2 Saturday sessions without a presentation as of now. So welcome, everybody, and I hope to see you again and again. Thank you. Adah Rose, would you like to take it from there?
I'll take it from here. Thank you. Nice. Hi, everyone. I'm so delighted to introduce artist Susan Stacks, who's an artist that I exhibit in my gallery. And I've known Susan almost since the beginning. The gallery is about 14 and a half years old, and I think I met Susan maybe 14 years into the gallery. She had just graduated from her MFA program at the University of Michigan, and she had moved back home to Northern Virginia, where she's from, and she'd gone to George Mason University as an undergrad. Um, in Susan's first show in the gallery, she did these very labor-intensive, she continues to do labor-intensive work, but these beautiful, simple pencil drawings. And it was a wonderful show. It was Susan and another artist, Gary Kachadurian, who both had a drawing practice. Susan's was abstract and Gary's was figurative. Gary's was all reproduced art, and Susan's was the actual, drawing right there on the wall. And she did a lot of sort of holistic drawings. And I remember when I first talked to her, I was intrigued by her describing to me sort of how she enters a drawing and she exits the drawing. And they're all obviously about labor, but she'll tell you more about them. And they're really also about healing. Well, over the course of the many years that I've known Susan, and she's had multiple shows in the gallery, and I've shown her work at art fairs, her work has gotten, I don't want to say more and more complex, but it probably has. And she started in a limited way, introducing color. And I think you're going to get to see all of this as Susan speaks. But she brought in mostly gold and silver, and those works were very influenced by a show of Japanese art that she had seen at the National Gallery of Art. And then suddenly color appeared. And every time she would show me new work, well, you will see now that much of her work deals with a lot of color, but the same sort of dot and dash and really complex mark making. So I'd like to turn it over to Susan now to tell you more about her work and show her slides. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Adders. Let me jump right in here. So I titled this "The Rules, the Value, and the Sincere Ghost." This imagining sort of a art trinity for myself. And I'll get into that, and they sort of step on each other. Hopefully it'll be slightly chronological. Before any other background, why am I doing this? Why art? Without any self-deprecation. It seems the most responsible outlet to excessive self-reflection. Converts what could be suffocating introspection into receptacles that can be used elsewhere, or maybe just held until they might be of use, or until they're not quite as dangerous. Material culture is how I love a humanity. I have a difficulty with people. I really enjoy them, but I'm constantly heartbroken and disappointed. And material culture is really how I keep my connection that we do have good intentions, and it's how I love a humanity that's demonstrably not always safe to be in direct contact with. Um, when that's overextended its capacity for cooperation, um, and when artworks or other objects that we make, music, writing escapes their temporal bounds by holding and radiating meaning beyond themselves, they become their own relics, and it's like psychometry in action. So, excuse me, I have my notes over here in this. So I thought I would put a bit of a reference piece up. This is a work about midpoint for me, and I think probably how, if anyone has met me before, they probably know of, oh, you do the gold paintings with the clouds. And so I just thought I would share an example of that work. It's from about 2017, so chronologically my midpoint as well. Um, so just some of the basics that are going to come up from this. It has a lot of my themes and thematic ruminations that I'm still deconstructing in the current work that I'll end with. So what I have here are three origin bodies directing radiant rays, which are made up of a hatched gold mark. And it's built up into this patina of overlap that has a pretty sharp contrast in person to the raw paper that peeks out behind it. And that negative space retained is pretty important. Some of those dots are in a hierarchy where they can cover, some are not, and they can't be seen against that light. Um, so the dots are forming simple organisms, clouds, colonies with strict rules of hierarchy, comparing what's opaque, transparent, and how they interact and denote what is solid or passable. And so I have this rule system that I implement and sort of use to grow all these drawings. And sometimes the rule system ends up where there's these illusionary spaces that go nowhere when actually it's all very, very flat. And so a little bit of biographic origin. Uh, I grew up in this area, as Adah Rose said, and had a strong relationship to the Smithsonian. It was really what I thought of as the city, other than my mother works in the city, and next to it is the Smithsonian. She worked at George Washington's ED for a while, and so going to the city was going to the mall and doing our normal round of natural history, National Gallery, Hirshhorn, anything else that we had for the variety pick of the day. But those were our big ones. Um, so I was growing up here, I was very aware that that was ours. Um, that because I was a citizen here, that this was mine, and going it was sharing this cultural history that we had. Um, that these items were full of value and more value for their um, cohabitation together. Um, a vital memory is going to the National Gallery in 1997. My parents, for some reason, went to see the Victorians show over and over and over again, which wasn't unusual for us to go there, but the repetition was a lot. And of course, it was horribly crowded. And so my brother and I would, wave at Flaming June and then be very polite and walk over to the East Gallery so we could see something else. Um, so in that space, I had as soon as you go through the walkway, you have a comfort of understanding even less. You're going into a world of very concrete symbolism that feels like a test or something to always decode, to something that everyone's a lot more equally out of place. So I'll talk about that a little bit. Overheard healthcare. Uh, Now I earn a living tangential to healthcare, but I grew up frequently listening to explanations of complicated medical situations with so much empathy. So my mother has been involved in clinical education for her entire career as the friend and family consult, excuse me. Um, and listening to her translate the clinical to also hold narrative value, um, a great deal of sensitivity and still admire the structure of what ails us, because frankly, a lot of diseases are fascinating in structure and how they form. Um, and all of that influenced how I processed concern and how it applied to many people, where you could see it on many different layers and find moments of empathy in between each. And then a third, I think, uh, relic of childhood, aspirational education. Um, it's the idea of education being noble and the right path to follow for any ambition. It's part of a greater American myth of academics as something that's going to provide you security, and the disenchantment that results from pursuing that depth of awareness. I was also, I'm about 40, basically. So part of a generation of extreme academic competitiveness when I was in high school. And I thankfully checked out of that pretty early on, realized that aiming for A minus was the way to go. Because those A plus crew was uh, really destructive to the soul. Um, And I feel like it's left a lot of us with an insatiable curse to address any possible implication, to decode everything, and that you're always going to be falling short of reading all the signs presented to you. Um, so the image that I have here is some student work that kind of directly illustrates these childhood concerns. When I was going through my grad school panic and changing mediums, as so many people do, um, these were cast forms made by slowly dipping wax into a water basin. So it was my hand going like this for a couple of hours. So the form would be made by this constant rebalancing as it cooled and solidified. At the time, I was talking to a lot of people in pain clinics and how we imagined pain and how maybe we could see it as something less of a body betrayal. And so I thought, well, we can make an enemy, or we could make a creature that maybe we would have some empathy for. Um, so part of the medical translation work I was interested in was personal. Turning that was just frightening or threatening into souvenirs, keepsakes, trophies, helped my own issues with orthopedic conditions, joint pain, and every comorbidity that has become accustomed to my body. And I would treat and present these items like they were valuable specimens mounted on upholstered board, classified and organized. So I do jump around and work that I show quite a bit. It made sense when I was writing it, and I just decided to keep going with it because the concept of sincerity is so important. Um, and then I thought I would include some influential exhibitions, writing, etc. I have a list of artists too, but it was just getting so very long. And probably anyone that you think I should have known and been influenced by, I probably have had a book pressed in my hand and told, go here and look there. Um, but probably most influential, and I'll mention a little bit, is Kirk Farndo's Mellon Lectures of 2003, which is in the great book Pictures of Nothing, or they have all the lectures on National Gallery's YouTube. Um, and then a few other of my touchstone books that really pierced me through the heart. They're probably the two most important exhibitions I've been to. Adah Rose mentioned that the Colorful Realm exhibition in 2012, where the up-close application of that paint was really vital for me, and embracing that graphic layering. Uh, and also in 2006, our Hiroshi Sugimoto History of History at Sackler Gallery. At the time, there was a Hirshhorn show of well-known photographs, and then you'd walk across the Sackler, and you get to see some of his personal collections of fossils, and just the presentation of those items was quite valuable to me. So I thought I would also, what's in the background here, Evelyn tables from the Hunterian Museum of Surgery and Anatomy. Medical imagery has always been very captivating, and probably as much of an influence to me as going to all these museums. And so I thought this was one of the best pieces of natural history uh, that haunts me, is seeing these dissections of nerves and um, other systems just laid out there. And really, you see this artifact, and I feel the hours of someone dissecting a life to remove all but this, uh, and how much awareness they would have of that body and person. They hold so much, I think. So, all right, back to me. Some orthopedics and how I structured this. A little silly, and this is a work in progress shot from many years ago, just to sort of before I get into how they are constructed. First, I'll go over the rules because I have really spent my career trying to find, well, what's a sincere mark? What is work that is going to be um, without any deception on my part? Um, and so I sort of made this rule system so that I could counter myself and focus and only mean what I do. Um, and then get into the value that is present there, or I am flowing into the work, or what I am reading from it. And then a very opaque idea of the sincere ghost, and where I hopefully have some success bringing it together. Just checking the time. So the rules, and this is a progress shot of progression of one of my pieces from 2015. Um, so this is an example of my rule system at its most strict. Um, and this is invented observers. And so the rules are born out of a desire to record despite failures of language. Because while I've overcome any literary bar presented to me, I've never felt a command wielding words. I think always too aware of the splintered connotations. I used to look up in every statement I would do, the etymology of every word. I took years of Latin without really actually learning the grammar of it, but I was so interested in the vocabulary um, because I wanted to make sure that I was understanding a root meaning. But of course, you're always not going to have that expanse that you need. Um, Strong limitations in the rule system um, sort of shield that impetus from complexity, responsibility. So it's providing a nursery for these simple shapes to develop in something else. Um, and all of these mark makings are executed with a conspicuous casualty, inviting error and irregularity. So most of the heavy rule pieces I see as data sets without keys, maps without legends, but their means can be determined by a bit of submissive observation. So this is a very early work, probably one of my earliest drawings, very early student work, before it completely dominated my practice. Um, and just to further talk about the rules, this was made with just these little hash marks, and as drawings that were stemming from the sculpture I was doing. So the identity of the rules act as DNA. They're directing a specific set of building blocks. Usually are these dots or hashes that I use for everything. And that's how the drawing grows. Errors are the mutations to succeed and alter work going forward or will fail. And my relationship with the piece asks for a commitment to continue that growth until all resources are expended. Each paper is a cell culture in that way, and viewing as a histology. Um, so I began by doing drawings of sculptures representing malignancy and uncontrollable growth. And so this is one of those, again, very early work sculptures. Um, and the rules started through documenting the materials working with. These are straw wrappers. And I would, processing this material as a form, I would carry it from place to place pretty much as I had. It was my burden to move because I was working everywhere. So there was an extension of my body, and I would have all these bags as I moved about. And my effort and labor was really poured into each of them. Each action is very light and gentle, but very quickly a cumulative burden. And so, and these are just done with, if you ever, as a child, pushing a straw wrapper, paper straw off, and it gets scrunched, and then you drip a few lots of water and see that capillary growth. And so I did that, and then I thought to preserve the staining. And so I was carrying around these tumors that I was making of my own volition, and also trying to figure out how I could represent this overgrowth and this idea of a colony. And so then I started doing these very, very simple erratic hash marks, which I've tried to replicate on the screen here. Okay. And so what did that grow into? So this is this hash marks depicting growth spun many more forms and progression rules. Eventually, the path created by the hatching was erased. Pockets were created between those pathways, which was distinguished by the stippling. The focus bounced between initial marks and showing only the consequences of those marks. So the punishing nature of this is all not lost on me. This is about a 6 by 8 foot piece, or the plane. So it's certainly not worked every bit of it, but it did require a lot of stamina for me. And the focus, I could really be wrapped up in these pieces, and they frequently would fall off the wall on me. So I had a great commitment to seeing this through. So the title is this line describing Penelope from the Odyssey. And something I related to, I tend to work at night and really feel like I'm undoing the day in the sense. And I was thinking about that washover of labor and work and what that meant. But I'll get into meaning a bit more later. And I will jump back in time again. So this is some of the work that Adah Rose was mentioning in the intro. This is a study for the work that I first showed with the gallery. And as these rules developed and changed, and I would be able to have tangents. So again, I'm stuck really on hash marks here, but they're changed. They're sharper and softer. It would be taken out of play and further developed in practice. And later on, these elements would be reunited during their time of intensive study. So they'd all tell each other what they did over summer camp and create something new together. Here are the hash marks that were soft and sharp in their negative space, are layered and irregular. This work was really thinking about calluses and the shield and benefit of those, physical, emotional, and thinking about marks and bodies under stress and how those grow. So like burl wood as well as compressed skin. And when we become self-protective of what's most valuable and how that's a kind of ornamentation. If I can make up words. So this is the piece from my description of all the rules. And I wrote so much on this slide. It's very tiny notes. So this is a completed version of the progression that I showed earlier. And I'm going to exhaustively go over the rules for you. It was composed by determining the length of my hand. A border was established that would allow intrusions for segments originating in the field. Using the established unit of measure, parallel lines and pencil at 1 and 1/2 inch marks for approximate width for this using the standard unit of measure again. Each set of these parallel lines would have 2 more sets overlap, one at a 90-degree angle and one at whatever I chose, undetermined. The active field is populated with these triple stack sets of lines until there's no more space for patches. And then any space in between, outside that border area that's protected, is going to be continued until I get to another solid patch. And then those spaces are filled with stippling that must concentrate in angles and disperse into the shape. All pencil is erased. So a lot of rules, but there's also a lot of freedom within those rules. I can sort of be as regular as I want. But again, those rules keep me contained in a way. And so me choosing how much dispersion of stippling becomes really vital in the moment. And in fact, I can tell in this drawing where I broke a rule. There's one key area. And I feel like if someone else is subjected to this or in the presence of it enough, that eventually they would be able to see this inconsistency as well. And I think this is the most sincere piece I have ever done. And it's something that's
Susan,
probably going to stay with me. Yes.
are you stippling with a pen? And
Yes.
pencil are the lines, and then you erase them, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And also, how big would this one be approximately?
This one's not very large. This is 18 by 24 inches.
Okay, thank you. That gives me a sense of this.
Yeah. And this is a micron pen, which is my pen medium at the time. Oh yeah, so I sleep under this, drawing it. But really most of my work I feel is sort of done when I'm done with it. And this is an artifact of that process. And this one has stayed with me because I think probably I'm going to use this container later. It's an exoskeleton.
This must be so meditative.
And now I'll jump back to the Gold family. And the titles of these, Movement 5, Now You're Marching, and the Ghost Reconnaissance, that came from a discussion with Shostakovich. How would be properly naming movements. The string quartets, very good. So this is the same family of that overall representative work, my themes. And really, after all these very strict rules, here's where I started to let some more meaning and warmth in. And that they began to resaturate the drawing field. The softness from the pencil hash marks that were so sharp before when talking about calluses are allowed to persist together and are basketed. They're absorbent of the light that appears to emanate from them. The overlapping hierarchy is tried to balance, and the dots screen the action, visible but unaffected by dramatic overcoverage from the hash mark form. And these beams were really standing out to me as both very accurate physical idea of how sunlight radiates out, and also heavy interest in Baroque clouds and that transfer of energy and that really direct communication through lush ornamentation. And certainly manga and a history of Asian art where these have a lot more meaning. And I would go back and forth because this is such a powerful symbol that I don't own at all. And so rule systems really let me dedicate myself to that sincere purpose. Is why am I interested in this? Why am I interested in this light? Yes, sorry, I have very tiny notes. So gold is also pretty obvious as a marker of value. And it's also reflecting a bit on the viewer. So the environment that they're bringing into it also affects it. The patina takes a lot of time and resists those clouds. Here they're very sticker-like, more crust than volume. And again, it's a very flat space. So it's just a thin layer of something that's suggesting it could be more. All right. And that's enough rules.
Then I ask you if the previous one was gold leaf, or are we, because it's hard to see it
Yeah,
in
it's a gold pen. So
gold pen. Okay.
yeah, it's a
So it shines a little bit. That's all I wanted to know. I didn't want to interrupt. Oh, great.
not very large.
Right. But it does shine to the viewer.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
And so part two, which I know I need to keep going because of our technical difficulties.
Amazing.
I kind of am a yapper. Sorry about that. The value. And these are my friend and my cohort in grad school, Michael Borowski, who teaches at Virginia Tech. These are his parents looking at some of my work, which I just love that picture. And describing the rules, so that the drawing plane was like a cell culture, and based on the substrate and structure of the material, the drawing grows until the resources are exhausted. But the elements and contributions thereof can stand in for quite a bit. So I started to get into with the sunlight, and I'll delve back in. So again, jumping back in time for an older work, my life as a sweater. This is about 19 and a half by 19 and a half. Again, with the micron pens. And I put a little quote from Moby Dick. But whenever I find myself growing grim about the mouth, whenever it's damp, drizzling November in my soul, I kind of ruminate over paper. It is this meditative process for me, or that Penelope act of taking away the day, the work of the day. What am I containing and recording when I'm doing this? Labor, I'm marking time, I'm recording my work. I long dealt with issues with insomnia and other, again, comorbidities impacting rest. I used to refer to the drive as an emergency generator that would only operate when I was in recline. The desire for sincere exhaustion is really what I receive from a lot of these images. The labor here is direct, though organized. It's erratic, grows as it needs to from an excessive resource, and balanced. And I thought would not be sincere to not bring this up, but in the past, when I was describing the work, the way I viewed my process, I was told was similar to Lyman Beecher, who is a Congregationalist minister, Harry Beecher Stowe's father, erratic fellow, eventual abolitionist. But he would, when he had fits of excessive energy, would shovel sand in his basement. And I have thought the application of my rules as a very ordered mirror of that. I now view this work and the work I do for a living and everything as sand shoveling, not with any malice, but with a real flattening of what labor means and how I categorize something as valuable or not. And the forms created here are batteries, stores of my labor that I could barter with, sometimes successfully. And what I have to offer, excuse me, is honest work and my time without illusion. So, and then I believe this is, we're almost done with the gold ones, but they're very important to me. Directly the sand shoveling. So these heavily gold, white, pencil and black blue series was primarily navigating my mind and my human relationship to light, how it's seen through interference or absent and opaque, balancing a desire for something energetic and bound, somewhere in reality, but also reasonably accessible, how the relationship between bodies can be determined by what's able to be obscured, dominant in frame, and coddled. We mentioned we were chatting earlier, but I'm frightened on a childlike level of outer space. So I absorb a lot about it, but with half attention to spare myself the horror. But I'm also very fascinated. Um, so the story of discovery is powerful, and it's about convergent knowledge. And such far out of oxygen locations and scale is really only conceivable because of a cascade of other measured observations. Um, so I'm always captivated by astronomical images, not just for the delight of texture and color, but a humbling use of negative space. I think it's easy to forget what that darkness is. It's not just a great contrast to the bodies that we see. But my favorite images are always going to be some beautiful eye candy. And then there's these black squares that you see encroaching on the image. And shamefully, I was like, well, what is that? And I was talking to an astronomer. And he said, oh, well, that's the part we haven't looked at yet. Um, and the idea of those dark spaces being something self-cropped because we haven't explored that far. I don't think we're used to seeing maps with edges. And I think there's something very beautiful in that negative space. All right. Okay. Trying to be moderate on time. If you'd like me to speed up or slow down, please let me. I have a little bit left. Cool. So here are the dots and dashes. This is when the goal element started to break down, and really started making everything more dynamic and warmth and willing to be attached to further meeting. The dots and dashes that had been isolated reunite. The origin of the gold hatches is not necessary because the cavity remains, so we no longer have the graphite basketing. The stippling is more dramatic with its own movement and several layers of hierarchy to record. Um, the energy transferring properties exist further into the space, not only the background layer, they are purposeful, splintered, and only visible to need. And here I really see these broken beams as failures of transference. It makes the cloud shapes more dynamic in response because they have to cover that gap. A need to bridge gaps of communication. And then I wanted to mention this is breakfast for dinner before relaying bad news. It's a foray into finding new meaning. So I had all these forms and they had been developing, and I think this is most personalizing them as areas of comfort or nurture, and trying to turn it into something that would be a balm, or a place to heal. So finding new reading for these intersected radiant beams as sort of these baskets, um, sort of growing up into what they had originated from. Same time and going on with these works, I started splitting everything into diptychs. And just because I was thinking about these forms and how they wanted to reach out and who could they really speak to that would speak the same language as them, I've kind of built them into a corner. And so having everything in these split panels would provide them a friend. And again, jumping back in time to another old one, because now I'm talking about meaning and everything. This is the best title I've ever done. Renovations Keep the Ghosts at Bay. And this is another 6 by 8 foot paint plane, and using those very tiny microns. Um, uh, it's best title and also a good example of sincerity of process and purpose. When I felt true enough to write the title directly on the paper. I feel like it's earned its words. So each piece in this series was about an obsessive and ritualistic response to loss. So this is from the same series that the Penelope titled image was from. And this one was the most on the nose about Sarah Winchester. There's been several horror movies and other media since this time on her. But if you're ever out in Southern California, I believe that's where her mansion that was continually built so that she could trick and pacify the ghosts of everyone that died from a Winchester rifle. It's like, that's a pretty, comparatively, that's a good use of money. She employed a lot of people. Um, Writing typically only appears in my titles. The phrases are obliquely adorned, clumsy in reference and balance. And I think that these titles that have playfulness or an allusions to songs or movies or books, and have a cadence that's sort of joking to them, um, uh, leaves them to be saturated in some archival meaning. Uh, right, more modern work. Comorbidities in love. Um, a return to color. In the evolution of these works, those cloud forms really started taking over. And negative space that has soft tissue. The sunlight brought back the warmth in, and now we can sort of feel our bodies again. So it has an exuberance and a beginning of a breakdown between the hierarchy of the stippling that previously had been very stark on top or under a bottom layer, and now there's a bit more confusion about layering. Um, um, Whenever I bring in representation, even in a very blocky form like this, blocky, stiff, um, my relationship with the body tends to be one of resentment, with comorbidities that overlap. And so I have these wanted to provide a lush, sensuous resting place for a form too encumbered for graceful movement. Um, Apologies, I know we're running out of time, but I'm gonna follow the color for work now, so I talk fast. So again, this is planning for your worst self, which is a general, my life philosophy is being very aware of flaws and trying to make sure I don't harm anyone through them. Uh, a wide variety of substrate, all addressed by two colors of stippling, working in tandem to balance, soften, and prevent harm. Um, so I'm collecting and obscuring this background. The stippling changes behavior and can interact meaningfully with other types of overexpansion, coverage of area, and less import to a form obscured. Um, and, and then continuing, We've never been this sad, but just got a new favorite song. Um, Another with near body forms, or are they trees, or something else? These limbs or finger growths stark against the bloody, bruising uh, ink washes. Um, Again, finding this lush environment alongside wounding, hesitant reaching out after hurt. And so meaning sort of seeps into whatever I'm doing or can frequently watching alongside. And so although using these very simple marks ends up being pretty reflective of the time that they were done in. And so the final part, Sincere Ghosts, I just have a couple of new work from this year. It's all very hard to photograph and see without this more um, pattern. Um, but I think the title for this one will be Return on Overinvestment. So process is the root of my practice, the value, everything I attach to it through reference, projection, a metaphysical transference of intent. And so what is a sincere act now after all this processing? I recently took about a year break of creating anything. Large concern as I'm ruminating over boundaries, hierarchies, unassigned meaning has been tackling enemy. Not that it could be simply done away with, but to disregard the realization and work towards community meaning and values anew and exploring other narratives where people create communities out of nothing. But then really, I felt the crest of our country's enemy has already crashed on shore. What direction do our efforts take, and why pile up all this sand that's going to be eroded so carelessly? Um, and that's until I have a young niece, and she asked me to make her something, and of course I had to. And then I realized the power of sincerity could still do something for me, and I could still keep going. Um, in the influential writing links, I am paraphrasing from the conclusion to Kirk Barnow's known series. Um, Abstract art is a symbolic game that requires faith and ignorance. And what I've really trying to find a place of comfort in ignorance where we're approaching things on a very base level and finding ourselves in there. In these next few pieces, I've been focusing on keeping that sincerity. It's been about layers and division, and these layers are different. They work on a different form and allow different substrates to be of same equal value. I still have that 3 base layers of energy coming through. I have gold beams. I have beams that are not gold. And then I have the third as this body form that's sort of hiding in the background. Um, and so I'm letting things hold those standards of weight instead of having only beams or only dots. The dots here are uncompromising, refusing to be divided further than where they lay, and dealing with ramifications of being flattened and lightened by beams of gold. There's no defined border or concentration, but there's still a rule system and order. Colors are not placed by chance, but are allowed to move in or match with a neighboring field. If abstract work's about inventing meaning, this is egalitarian in the distribution and utopian in accepting variance. I'll spare you my working title for this one. So again, similar ideas in this work: freedom and safety in a competitive partnership. You need society to feel safe. You need safety to feel free, and the same things encroach on each other. Negotiation and codependency for frequent balancing. Um, and then the final, which is very hard to see. I'm aware that uh, these are sincerely difficult to view in person. They're very different. They only exist in detail if another part of the drawing out of focus. Um, I have corrected vision, but not fully. I'll never be 20/20. So getting too close to things is often a requirement, and is how I usually first approach artwork myself, is I want to go and see that surface texture first off. Um, and this can be, from this perspective, busy, irritating, formless. I do have a terrible working title for this. A paper yearning to be a Vocaloid representation of Dvorak New World Symphony. So that's going to be workshopped. But in detail, this works a lot different. Up close, you can see purpose and vibrancy. They're tight-packed neighbors, finding commonalities one way or another, through the ground underneath or the shielding from above. They're not unchanging to the varying ground that they're underneath. Regardless of individual circumstance, they're cooperating. Um, they still follow an order and rubric in color application as well, even though it might not be quite visible. And I really love seams and edges, the discrepancies and overlaps of communication that do not slide into place, varying expectations and connotations. How do we act in such unpredictable terrain? I think it's trying to achieve grace, inventing your own consistent responses to inconsistent situations. And so that's why it's so uncompromising. It's championing sincerity in a way that I don't think I have before. And about done. It's my last slide. This is a bit of an older one, but I think for the topic. Um, Talking about sincerity, I've been thinking a lot about grace. and saying give people grace or give yourself grace and what that means. I was researching hermits and was very excited to find that there were Lutheran hermits. I was raised Lutheran. I don't have too much connection to it now, but I realized that I've sort of projected on a lot of ideas um, of their concept of grace. Of course, I was always very jealous of everyone that was raised Catholic around me because they had such great material culture. And mine was sort of get rid of all that ornamentation for procedural faith. Still complexity, a different kind of complexity. Um, but I've always inadvertently personalized that concept of grace. I'm used to think of the Trinity as transformers. That's another great token to age. So my desire to see grace as something as a gift embedded to all, equal to evaluation, and my desire for sincere action is one to perceive or wield a kind of grace. Art is alchemical for meaning and value. It holds the potential of data into layers of value, the identity of its history. The sincere desire to work this way is building my own lens to perceive grace. And that's really how I view most of my work now, so that these are different lens into different planes of being. Um, I think of any kind of artwork and realistic artwork. This is where those Baroque domes come into play, or plague monuments, where we're really trying to create a space that will connect our lowly earthly selves to something more. And I'm really interested in the space in between that, where what is down and our concern is negotiated with what is something transcendent, instead of separating those planes out. And that's what I'm going to continue to do. And thank you.
Oh, Susan, that was amazing. I wasn't sure whether to pay more attention to your words than the images, but I know I lost something in between because they're so worth contemplating, and then hearing you separately, not separately, but I mean on another dimension too. I love your combinations, and I have never seen someone using stippling as the main medium or technique. Like, we use stippling to shade something or to create some little marks, but you are really taking stippling to a higher level. I love that. And I love your combinations of colors. I also love that your abstraction, what to me looks very abstract, maybe geometric, but you imbue it with such meaning when you describe the clouds and the baskets and I love that. It was like turning my brain upside down from what I was looking at. So thank you for that. I have lots and lots more questions, but I want to open it to other people, and then maybe I can ask you one or two. Thank you so much. This was very enlightening and beautiful. Thank you. Any questions, you guys? Jump in.
I think I got my audio to work okay. I had a quick question. Um, you kept mentioning the idea of rules and as part of your practice and so forth. And I keep thinking about like how, as artists, we're always, I guess, pushed or encouraged to break rules rather than impose rules upon ourselves. Especially as abstract artists, we don't naturally rely on making things representational. We can do things that we want that the limitations of representational work don't really need to follow. And I kept wanting to replace the word rules with parameters. Can you talk a little bit about like why the strict idea of rules versus just kind of guidelines or parameters, and like how does that play overall with your process?
I think I need the rule because there has to be that consequence, even if the consequence is something to myself. Uh, uh, I had a critique once where someone, was the most famous person I've had a critique with, said that my professor was trying to eat my heart. by making me do this work. And I was like, no, I'm eating my own heart. I'm setting it up this way. And so I really, I think the rules, I'm a rule follower as much as I am very stubborn to authority. And so there's another balance that, well, at least I'm going to make myself the authority. I'm going to impose my own rules. So maybe it's something that I can live with in that way. But it does seem I am quite stuck on it being rules instead of parameters.
Right. Although in a way, as artists, we also impose rules. We say, I'm going to do this with an impressionistic or, approach or a la prima, and that's kind of our own rule. So it goes both ways. And I think that's a very interesting question.
Yeah.
I also think about, the idea of imposing rules upon yourself. Let's just pretend that you're doing a basic painting representation and you say, well, I'm going to do a Zorn palette today. So my colors are this. And then at a certain point, you have to say, well, is the work being hindered or enhanced by the imposed rule or parameter? And I wonder, do you ever run across this point where you just say, this isn't working for this piece. This piece needs to expand out of its cage a little bit more. And I'm not saying one way is better or the other. I'm just trying to think through my own process and say, because I identify so much with a lot of your influences and your ideas, but I feel like if that were me and I was putting myself in your shoes, I would drive myself crazy.
I think that's it goes into the rules is that I'm committing. And so even when things are not going anywhere where I thought they were, I feel I feel a contractual commitment to complete at least the next rule process. Then it can go dormant, perhaps. And so I do have a lot of work that's at a certain level of space, and then it's just, well, I don't want to smother it anymore. So they just kind of live half-lives there.
Someone says, I love your extreme concentration to find order. Let me see the rest of it. Order and happiness. Even your medium allows for your need to control, but allows for the work to take over in the creation or over the creation. Yeah, I would agree with that too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it also, I've been thinking all along, in my other life, I was a physician. And so I was trying to find red blood cells, and cells that sort of integrate into one into the other, that morph into a larger thing.
Yeah.
So that challenged me in a nice way. I think I need to talk to you.
I work in healthcare, and I work with nurses and physicians all day, doing helping make their education. And so I feel constantly fed by seeing how they share knowledge and the behavioral aspects of what lets people take that in. And I think it's very it comes up very much.
I think your process also brings a lot of healing.
Yeah.
The meditative aspect and healing for us to look at it. There's an order in the apparent abstract of chaos or something. There's no chaos, but I mean all the dimensions that you imply in a 2D work. When things get smaller and larger and all, things are not symmetrical. They imply dimensionality and depth. And
Yes.
other galaxies, maybe. I started going nuts. What paper do you use, Susan?
Primarily Stonehenge.
Okay, so a printing type paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's smooth. I love Stonehenge too. And do the colors you add mean something to you, like how you use them? And then I have a correlated question, and I'll say it now so you can speak. But when you start a new work, do you plan some of the organization of the space of the paper, or you let that flow?
Everything is planned as a layer. So it's a response to the previous action. really. And so it's that constant rebalancing. I have, or I guess I had scoliosis that was corrected, so I'm fully fused. And I think that has been probably a big deal how I think about that structure. Um, I, I lost my track there, but
The colors mean
the
something
colors,
to you
yeah.
specifically, or
Occasionally they do, but usually I have one or two that mean something, and then the rest will come in. I've sort of fallen into a path that now I think whenever I have any representation of a body, no matter how blocky, I use this chocolate brown, and it's very like bark. Um, and so I really think of trying to, instead of thinking of myself as or thinking of a body as a malforming thing, I want it to be a tree.
and you ink the paper? Do you do a background? You tint the background, or
Yeah, so that's all
okay,
with
like in the
fountain
first
ink
layer or
washes.
second layer or something? Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. I would love to see the process, like you did in that sequential drawing,
Mm.
um, the older piece. But I loved seeing it because how you were coming in from the edges and populating the
Uh,
center.
Part of the reason I have the rules is I always want to stop right before I finish because then you can see this great contrast between what was there before. And I think that's what I've done in the past, and I've regretted it. And so now I'm fully, that's why everything's fully covering. There's no more compromising, which we'll
So
see
how do
what
you know when
happens.
a piece is done? You have a
When I can't,
feeling?
there's no more rule process
Okay.
left. Or I can't bear, I try to kill every other darling, if I feel tempted. Because at least then it'll get me used to giving something up, and I'll make better decisions.
Wow, that's great. Well, thank you so much. This was very enlightening for all of us, and very, very unique, both style and process. Thank you. Do you think
Thank
you'll continue along the multicolor way?
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So those three are from this year. I work very slowly. Um,
Oh, that
and so I've
I
done
have to.
about one a month. So I need to
One a month.
start
Okay.
April, so it's been delayed.
Still fast in my
Uh,
book.
but I'm very energized again.
That's
So,
fantastic.
and thank you all
And
for
you
having me
said
so much.
you like to do it at night. Are you a night owl,
Very
basically?
much.
Yeah.
I short sleep, and so I do my 9 to 5. I take a nap. I work all night. I
Oh,
sleep, and then I go to work.
whoa. Do you get enough rest?
I get a lot more than I used to, actually. I used to
Good.
try to sleep at
Okay.
one chunk. This is
I
actually much.
want you to be healthy so you can
Yes.
continue working. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. Any other last minute comments?
Had a quick
Jump in the
question
chat.
reference to Dvorak. Not often do I hear people pronouncing his name correctly, so I was just wondering what the connection was, if there was some Czech background or more in alignment.
Just grew up with music. I think I talked about my mother and a lot, but my older brother is uh, probably the researcher of my life and who I've always followed behind and had always had a great appreciation for music. And so grew up listening to absolutely everything. And um, I'm very grateful for that. And music was really my first art, playing.
Yeah, I might have stepped out on that point. Also, as far as the connection with the Japanese screens and the gold leaf screens, was that mentioned too?
Yes, yes. Um, one show I forgot to mention was near all the same time, all of these exhibitions that just like were so striking for me. I think at Saclay Freer there was uh, exhibition of Buddha's followers, and it was all these beautiful, um, and there was the most dramatic use of these beams as power and something that could come from an individual that I've ever seen. It was very beautiful. I think it was around a similar time frame as some of the others. one of the other works I was talking about. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming. That's fantastic. And can we see your work somewhere currently or in the near future?
I have work at Adah Rose Gallery in Kensington. And on my website, which I should update because I haven't done it in a while. I deleted all my social media because of conflicts of, and so I'm not quite sure where I want to be on the internet yet, but I'm going to figure that out soon.
Well, keep
It's on
doing
the Artsy too. They have a complete inventory on art.
Yes, Artsy. Thank you.
That's wonderful. And thank you to everyone for staying a little extra because we got delayed a little bit by our technical issues. I wanted to remind you on May 9th, we have Reem Basus. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. She is an artist and she will be hosted by Lindsay Mueller, also a friend of the ACO. And Reem is a survivor of the Lebanese Civil War of 15 years in 1975 to 1990. So she integrates that in. She'll tell us about that in her work as well. So May 9, and don't forget that we have the art clinic online, literally like you say it, all one word. Artcliniconline.com is our new website, but we're going to send you links, so don't worry about memorizing it. But if you want to look it up.
And also on May 1st is the opening reception at Stone Tower Gallery for Elaine Wilson, who was an instructor at Michigan as well, speaking of Michigan. And she'll have an exhibition up for the entire month of May right here at Glen Echo Park. She was the Bethesda Painting Awards winner in 2025, so last year. And she will also be holding a workshop on design at the end of May here at the Stone Tower. So we're very excited to have Elaine taking over the space for a whole month. Yeah, no, there's still space in it. It's a little bit larger because it's a design workshop. We don't need a lot of space, so. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.